Welcome to AppBuilderTV.com, How to Freelance for Mobile Developers, Lesson 4, Creating Contracts or Service Agreements. One of the biggest mistakes most new freelancers will make is taking on a project without doing up a formal written agreement. If you operate without any written agreement in place, you will get burned. It's just a question of time, so don't take the risk. People new to freelancing often think that doing up a formal agreement will scare away customers, or that they don't have the money to spend on an expensive lawyer to create one. Both of these are unfounded. Keep it simple. No need to get all legalese on anybody. Keep your agreement simple. Keep it clear. Use plain language. Keep it short. Bulleted lists work great. You'll find that the vast majority of problems that happen on a project usually revolve around a mismatch in expectations. A simple worded, clear service agreement can help prevent this. A few things every service agreement should have: the name, address, and contact details for the client and freelancer, the scope or description of the project and work you will be doing for the client, the responsibilities that you will take on during the project, the responsibilities that the client will take on during the project, an indication of time estimates and finishing dates, your rate or estimated cost of the project and payment schedules, a termination clause, tax information and retainer info, IP and ownership, a place for a signature and the date for you and the client. Contact details. Your service agreement should have your name, address, company name if you have one, postal code or zip code. You'll need the same info about your client, which you may need to look up or ask them for. You'll want the name of the person who actually signs the contract, in addition to their company name if they have one. Scope and description. You'll want to state in clear and simple terms the nature of the work you will be doing for the client. You are obligating yourself to do anything on this list, so be as clear as you can. Build an app is not sufficient. What kind of app? What features will it have? What technologies will you use? How will it be tested? If you are too loose with the scope of your agreement, what happens quite often is that clients will ask you for more and more little things to be added or changed and may expect you to do them for free. Be very clear in your agreement that items and requests that fall outside the scope are billable and may be additional costs. Your responsibilities. In addition to clearly describing the work you are about to take on, you should also establish ground rules before the project begins for things like your contact hours. What contact hours and modes of communication will you use? Are you the 9 to 5 type and prefer talking on the phone? Maybe you'll work on the weekends and use Skype to talk to your client. You may wish to state that you are not responsible for the marketing and business development of the app, unless you are providing this as a service. You should state that you will notify the client when a request falls outside the scope of the agreement. You should also state that you will make the client aware of any events or obstacles that come up that could impede the progress or change the timeline. Client's responsibilities. You may wish to state that the client is responsible for all marketing and business aspects of the app unless you are providing this service as well. You should state what assets the client is expected to provide for the project, including text, images, audio, and any other assets that you won't be providing. You should state when and how the client is responsible for paying you. I would recommend you break the project up into chunks and schedule payments upon initiation and completion of each chunk. Waiting for one big payout at the end of a project has just about done in many a freelancer. You should state that the client is responsible for providing timely feedback and answering any questions that you may have. If the app needs to be approved by Apple, then the client should be aware that you cannot guarantee that the app will be approved. Time estimates and finish date. You should always provide some kind of time estimate as to when different parts of the project will be done and when things will wrap up as a whole. Unless you are absolutely sure you can get something done by a particular date, always state that these are estimates and could be subject to change. Unexpected things will always pop up in pretty much every project, so make sure that you have some wiggle room as far as time goes to deal with this. I usually like to give a range estimate, i.e. I think this feature will take between 3 to 7 days to implement. Don't forget to actually keep track of the time you spend on a project. Your rate or the project cost. If you are working hourly, then the agreement should clearly state what your hourly rate is. If you don't want to work weekends and the client puts the rush on you, you may also have a higher rate you charge for rush jobs. If you are quoting a fixed price or range for the project cost, this should be clearly stated in the agreement, so there is no chance of confusion. Termination clause. Despite your best efforts, sometimes things don't always work out. Locking yourself at the hip with a client can be bad news. Here's the deal. If you aren't happy working with the client and they aren't happy working with you, then you shouldn't be working with each other. Provide a way for you or the client to bail out if need be, so things don't get ugly. Because I do all my project in an agile, phased approach, breaking it up into small chunks, I allow my client or myself to get out at the end of any given phase if things just aren't working out. Tax info. If you will be collecting taxes, you should state your local tax rate and your tax or business number so you can account for this properly. If you are under a certain yearly limit, you may not have to charge or collect taxes, so check with your local tax authority. Be careful, because once you do pass a certain level of earnings, you will most likely have to collect taxes on your projects, regardless of whether you are a business or not. Retainer. As I had mentioned in a previous video, I always ask for a retainer on any new project. A retainer is typically an upfront initial payment that is non-refundable and can range from 20 to 50% of the project cost. You should state in the agreement that you will require a retainer, how much it is, and that the project can start as soon as they sign your agreement and provide you with the retainer. You should also state that the retainer will be applied towards the project cost and is not an additional or extra fee. IP and ownership. IP issues can be a huge factor in complicating projects. Watch your back. While I usually do not claim ownership on most projects, I always maintain the right to re-leverage knowledge and skills acquired while working on any project on future projects. The main reason I do this is that you can't constantly be reinventing the wheel as a developer. I also usually state that I will not use code or techniques derived on one project with a direct competitor. Signatures and dates. You should have some kind of clause at the end of the agreement to the effect that all the parties involved have read and understood and wish to enter into the agreement. Make sure that there is a spot for your signature and the client's, as well as a spot for the current date. The agreement is signed. Now what? In upcoming episodes, we'll be discussing strategies for dealing with challenging clients. If you're interested in learning more about how to develop mobile apps, visit appbuildertv.com and get instant access to over 30 free videos. You can also follow me on Twitter at appbuildertv.